All right, peeps. We are back for a dating relationship Q&A. What is going on here? Just trying to get the lighting right. Not sure about this lighting, but that's better. That's better. All right. So let me get this on Twitter. Apologize for the delays, people. Apologize for the delays. But you know how it is. I had a call with a prospective client and it went over. Just how it is. All right. Let me see here. Now, I've been sharing the wrong link on these prior shows. I'm sharing the studio link. So I'm going to get the right one here. There we go. There we go. All right. How are you guys all doing? How are you guys all doing? All right. Let's do this. So, question number 1, my friends. How to build tension in order to have the loving sexual romantic desire, as opposed to the raw lust and novelty at the beginning where comfort was low. Are the actions such as eye contact with the smirk or silence, for example, just as effective in a long term relationship? If not, how does one create tension in a serious relationship? Um, trying to think if I should read this whole thing. I'll read the whole thing. Most flings, this is an easy thing to do, as there is a state of dread and arousing mystery, especially when it's a trauma bonding situation. Trauma is arousing. We want the other person's validation, or they treat us according to our own dysfunctional attachment style. We play a role, and in turn, we get a sliver of what we truly desire. In a serious relationship where a level of comfort exists, the good kind, the level of intimacy, it seems easy to become complacent. We trust that we have this person in our corner. We focus too much on work, not putting in the game as they did in the beginning mutually. The result is that both parties in the relationship are not as sexually desired, horny, both ends. The party feels fulfilled in some way, not fully though. They have their comfort needs met, but they crave the animalistic feeling they had at the beginning. They miss the tension. P.S. The inspiration for this question came to the realization of why people have affairs or are unhappy in long term relationships. They think the relationship is wrong just because it plateaued, not because they wanted to, but because they didn't know how to continue building tension as they became more comfortable and trusting of each other. So very, very good. Very good. The fundamental question here, of course, just to return to it, are the actions that you would do when you're dating just as effective in a long-term relationship? If not, how does one create tension in a serious relationship? Well, creating tension in a healthy way in a serious relationship is mostly space. It's mostly space. Um, and the reason for it is this. When you get let me all right, let me restate this entire thing. So when you're initially just dating somebody, when you're initially in a relationship and you have all those feelings and those fantasies at the beginning, those things that get you really, really excited about the other person. The problem is that that stuff was based on an illusion. You were looking for a high, okay? So if the question here is how do you get that high that you got in the beginning of the relationship? How do you get that high later on in the relationship? Well, the answer is actually that you don't get that high later on in the relationship. You don't have the same feelings as in the beginning because in the beginning, you didn't know the other person. You didn't know anything about them and you were able to project all this fantasy onto them. So what you were really loving in the beginning there was the fact that you could fantasize, that you could project this on the other person, and that because you were both doing it, you were both creating some ideal fantasy that was external to yourself. in a relationship, you get the relationship gets to a point of real connection and trust, then the big challenge is not how do you go back to the honeymoon phase where you had all these fantasies. It's more about how you come to actually see the person you are with as the ideal that you always wanted, really. So it's falling deeper in love with that person. And both of you giving more, connecting more with each other, accepting each other more, not taking each other for granted, going out of your way to continually develop more and more expressions of love for that other person. That transcends the honeymoon phase. It's even better than the honeymoon phase. A way to look at this as a correlation is, um, which by the way, guys, does the sound better with this? Do you think the sound is better with this microphone than in prior YouTube shows? I just wanna check that because I obviously can't hear the difference. Um, but what I was gonna say is the okay, so sounds the same. Well, what the fuck microphone? That's what I thought. What this is ridiculous. Is it better if I do this? Is this better? Is that better? No, it's the same. It's the same. I got this gamer mic for nothing. Okay, the correlation I was gonna make here, it's very similar to you saying, like, let's say you have some, social media addiction, or you have some dopamine-induced addiction, right? Dopamine addiction. Um, so maybe it's porn, or maybe it's video games, and so you get this real high. You're playing this video game, and your imagination's running wild with it. Th you know, you have this really good porn scene, okay, whatever. You have this really good porn scene, and you jerk off, and you feel like, "Oh, wow, that was such a crazy, crazy fantasy." Um, it's kind of like the question with the honeymoon phase is, can you return to that level of, excitement? And the real question should be, do you wanna return to that kind of excitement, or do you want something that's real? Do you wanna play some kind of video game, or do you want to turn your life into a video game, in the sense that you're doing cool stuff all the time? It's the same thing with the relationship, and the barriers are similar, and so you have a different feeling. So, the same kind of stuff that you have in the beginning of dating, that amps up your dopamine, amps up everything, that also causes a crash. And so it's actually more a matter of, um, changing your appreciation or valuation of this kind of, how do I put it? Changing what you value. Is this the kind of feeling you value? If this is the kind of feeling you value, then you're you're not gonna be able to recreate it in a relationship. The catch here, okay? Okay, Ben, the catch here. It's actually it doesn't look very good. Um, the catch here is that if you actually are conveying real love to each other and not the bullshit, then they're you know you are much less likely to even want that to begin with. It's the same thing as, like, if you have something that actually makes you feel good, do you want to go back to something that just takes you on a roller coaster ride? Some people do, but I mean, this is the reason that people have crappy relationships today, and that they're doing all sorts of degenerate stuff, like, "Oh, well, unless we're fucking a lot of random people in a relationship, there's no way that we can keep the excitement going." It's like, well, no, you're avoiding bonding deeply with the other person. That's the issue. You're avoiding it. I know there's some exceptions to that, but that's generally what it is. It's they're avoiding, they're looking to create some sort of fear response, some sort of anxiety response that the other person is doing something, and that turns into arousal. They submit it into arousal. It's um it's a it's a big turn of events, let's put it that way. If you decide to go that direction, it's usually not the right course to take. It's usually the end of the relationship. Steven, I love to hear that you're gonna be doing some coaching soon. I look forward to your application. Congrats on the raise. All right, let's go to the next question here. One second, I gotta dump this thing out the door. All right, apologies for that. Had the baby monitor in the room. All right, next question. Pat, how do you deal with an overly affectionate girlfriend? The aggressive need for cuddling is such a turnoff, and it makes me physically uncomfortable at times when I don't want to engage. Um, well, sounds like you have avoidant attachment. So it's a very classic anxious avoidant dynamic right there that we're hearing described. Girlfriend who constantly wants to touch, wants more physical affection, and a boyfriend who is uncomfortable and wants to pull away from it. I would just be honest with yourself about that, about where it comes from, what happens, why it's happening. And I would actually really learn about the attachment patterns, because if you don't learn about it, if you don't understand that your hesitancy to have physical touch, excuse me, guys, and her obsession with needing to touch, that's both extremes of that come from an attachment issue. And so going through that together will allow you to get more to a happy medium where you guys can be physically affectionate with each other, and yet not freak each other out. Because right now, you're viewing her as a problem and she's viewing you as a problem. And the more you pull back, the more it actually encourages her to try to grab onto you. Also, she probably her love language is physical touch. So, and that may not be your love language, right? Um, so important to keep that in mind. But I would actually get the book attached and I would go into it, because you know it, it is an unconscious dynamic between the two of you, and understanding that um you are both responsible for creating it is the way that both of you start to work together to give the other person what they need. And if you do that, you'll start to move to a secure relationship that will have a lot less extreme cuddle sessions for you, but will have enough cuddling for her. A happy, healthy amount of cuddling. All right, next question. So I answered this one a little bit on Twitter, but I put it on here because I thought it was really good to explore. Hey Pat, I'm getting a lot of comfort shit tests, always asking if I still like her and if I'm still attracted to her. I've used a lot of game negs and it has really worked, but it's hurting comfort. How do I increase comfort without doing it like a bitch? Today she said, "Can you say 3 nice things about me? It'll make me happy." I didn't say it, not because I didn't have things to say, but because it felt like she was forcing me to. I can tell it's from a place of being anxious and scared I don't care for her. How to resolve without giving frame desire. So what happened subsequently in this conversation, I'm gonna say, is that the girl messaged him having him, ask him to come over and fuck, right? So, the guy immediately will think, "Oh, haha, what was I worried about? Everything was going well." And a lot of red pill guys really don't see any problem with this. They think, "Well, look at this. I mean, you pull back and then look, she comes right towards you and you get sex and she's really enthusiastic. If you don't do that, You don't have it. Well, here's the issue. Okay, here's the issue. Here's the issue. The issue is that you're spiking desire, you're making her go and chase after you, but every single time this happens, it damages trust. Every single time it happens, it damages trust. So, if you have no long-term objectives for a woman, and you really just don't care that much, then go ahead and proceed this way, because you're going to be able to play her essentially like a fiddle. I mean, you'll know that you pull back, she comes towards you. You pull back, she comes towards you. Um, but the more that you do this dynamic, the harder you make it to be able to develop a dynamic based on trust. Relationships that have had serious power dynamics over time, um, if they survive a transition out of that, because what happens is that eventually the high gets less and less. She chases after you less, and especially if you were to get into a long, serious relationship. So another example of this, excuse me, I just got a dry throat. It's very dry in the room. If you were in a serious relationship with a woman, over time, you doing this pattern, she's just gonna try to get your attention less and less. And especially when she has 2 kids, she's gonna try to get it less and less. And ultimately, what's gonna happen is that you're going to have the frame kind of, but it's like she starts to become in a state of rebellion, and she doesn't really value what you have to offer as much. Because what she's ultimately looking for is she's looking for connection, and you are abusing the connection. It's actually an abusive relationship. I'm not saying that this guy is a bad guy, because the woman is also, in a certain sense, asking for it, because if she had more self-respect, she wouldn't do something like throw herself sexually at a guy who isn't making her feel good about herself. But women do this all the time because they are so desperate to be loved. So they do it, they disrespect themselves, and then wash, rinse, repeat, right? And then what happens is that when a woman gets to a point of really believing her value is so low that when a guy is kind to her, then she is not going to view him as valuable, because she perceives someone who's kind to her as not being valuable. So you have to like reset the entire thing if you were a guy who got into a relationship with her. um, what I want to emphasize with this guy is that he doesn't, if he doesn't feel like he can give a girl he's with a compliment, he's afraid of losing frame because she asked for it. I mean, that's just healthy communication. It's a desperate communication, really. That's an indication, being so afraid of losing the frame. Like, what are you afraid of happening? You compliment her and then she pieces and goes for some other guy. I mean, I would just rethink the entire dynamic. If being kind to a woman makes her leave, then why the fuck are you with that kind of woman? Think about that for a second. Like, it's not that you lost frame and that if you've been really withholding affection from a woman, but then you give her some, you start to treat her well, and she's like, "Oh man, I don't want to be treated well. I'm gonna go get abused elsewhere." I mean, you have to decide for yourself. Do you want to be a guy who's in a toxic dynamic? Do you want to be in an abusive relationship? Is that what you want to? Do you want to be the abuser in an abusive relationship? I mean, some women want to be abused. They want to be emotionally abused. I'm not convinced this girl does, but some women want to be emotionally abused. They would never say that. But if you treat them well, they leave. So what conclusion can you draw besides for that? You have to think about what kind of women you want to be with. You want to be with. And The issue is that we have our own frailty, and when you come to this power dynamics, we're afraid of getting hurt, so we try to dominate. You know, "Well, she's gonna leave. If she leaves, what does that say about me? That means I'm not valuable." And I get it. It's like it's a very vulnerable, scary thing for guys. It's a very vulnerable and scary thing. So, think about the kind of relationship you wanna be in. As I said on Twitter, if complimenting a girl causes you to lose the frame, then you really didn't have it to begin with, or she's really a messed up girl and you wanna stay away from her. Alright, next question. Let me get the one in the chat. I think you guys had a question in the chat here. So, do you think people should date outside their type? Um, I don't understand, Mr. R, what you're putting here. If you can clarify, Pat as people. But do you think people should date outside their type? SV, are you talking about personality types? Is that what you're referring to here? Please elaborate in the chat. Um, Sounds like though maybe you're talking about some sort of just whatever their aesthetic type is. Um, I'll answer it as if it's its aesthetic type because that's less subjective than what's his personality type. Okay, so this is very personal. A lot of people have varying levels of intensity with this. I think there are some people who only will date a very, very, very narrow type of women. Um, there's other people who date literally like people who look completely different ethnicities. It doesn't matter to them at all. So I think it really depends on the person. It's a personal preference. Some people are tighter in more in some parameters more than other parameters. I can tell you that I'm I've never been attracted to, um, women who are more curvy, and it's not because I didn't understand that they were attractive women. There's a lot of guys who were, like, all about those women, and I understood it. I understood that there was an appeal. It just didn't do it for me. I was always into thin women and particularly tall, thin women. So, like, I would date a woman if she wasn't, um, tall, but I all my girlfriends were tall. But they all had different hair colors, so they all different eye colors. So there was nothing that really was fixed on that front. So that was kind of my thing. Like I didn't really have much beyond that. So that was me. Um, I've seen other people have a lot wider of a range. I don't know if it has to do with openness. I'm not really sure what it is. Frankly, I don't know. But I don't think that they should do one thing or another. I think if someone's criteria is so extreme that they won't date anybody, then I think that's an avoidance pattern. But if they're dating people of a certain type and they love it, they continue to date it and they can get it, I mean, power to them, power to them. I don't I don't know exactly why it happens. There's speculation about certain imprints that they get when they're younger, but I don't know. I don't know, but I wouldn't say it's a should. I think it's personal preference. It's a good question. All right, next question. How to stop anxiety, worry, and doubt in relationships? It's like a rabid dog attacking our relationship and creating scenarios, and this leads me to sabotage the relationship. If doesn't love me, if she behaves bad, I suspect she doesn't love me too. Well, it is well, how to stop worrying, anxiety, and doubt in the relationship? Well, the question is where's the anxiety and doubt coming? Because it's not the relationship itself that's causing it. I mean, it might be exacerbating it, but if you're feeling this kind of constant set of anxiety and doubt, I mean, there's some attachment issue that the relationship is triggering. So is it getting too close to the person freaks you out? Feeling pulled away from him freaks you out? Um, this sounds like disorganized attachment, if I had to be honest here. And what's important to understand about disorganized attachment is that it's like anxious attachment, but it's got this deep, intense fear to it. So it's like you don't trust. You want to get close to somebody, but then you start to get close to them, and then you don't trust them. So you push them away. And then when they're away from you, you miss them. You're afraid of losing them. So you try to get closer and then, but not too close. Then you push them away. It's called fearful avoidant in psychological terminology. And it's, understanding that this is your pattern and that it's not real is really the main thing to focus on. Talking about it with, with your woman, if that's the same thing that's going through with her. You guys may have some sort of mismatched attachment situation. It's difficult for me to troubleshoot the whole thing based on what you said, but fundamentally, you if it's like damned if she does, damned if she doesn't, then it's just acknowledging that you have this issue and talking it through with the other person, feeling like opening up about your fears to them and getting it out on the table so that they can help when it starts to get triggered, that you can communicate it, that if you have a certain way of behaving when this anxiety gets triggered, that they know that that's what's going on, they can reassure you. It's going to take some really intense communication. Otherwise, it's probably not going to work out. You're going to have to be willing to face your fear and communicate. And that book by Adam Lane Smith, Slay Your Fear, it's a good book. It's a good book on this topic. Yeah, Ben, see, it's very, it's Ben in the chat's more interested in full-figured voluptuous girls. It's a really common thing. I mean, just guys have these different preferences. Those are probably the biggest preference right there, difference where you have, um, the sort of curvy versus thin, sort of split off. And then there's all sorts of little micro things, but I think that's probably the biggest one. And if I had to go and look at guys and their past girlfriends, I guess that sometimes it's still very mixed up. So not every guy has as strict of a aesthetic type, but I think men and women both have them. I mean, women definitely have them. Yeah, Mr. R, I'm with you. Legs were everything. It's all about the legs. All right. What do I think about a long distance relationship? Well, I've talked about this before, but I'll just say very quickly with it. Long distance relationships are fine if there's an endpoint in mind with them and you really see this going the distance. Not literally. If you see this not literally the distance, but if you see the relationship lasting. So, example would be if you guys are together and one of you gets work someplace else and they're going to be working there permanently and you guys are in different cities but you're going to stay together, that is a stupid long-term distance relationship. It's a stupid long distance relationship. If they're going to leave you to go work someplace else, or if you're going to leave her and there's no end in sight and you're staying together, you are just simply weak and you're stupid, and break up. No point in this. Now, if you need to take a job for 1 year, if you're going to be deployed, for instance, you're in the military, you're going to be deployed and you're going to be deployed for a year. Well, that's not a stupid long distance relationship because it has an end point in mind and you guys are ultimately coming back together. And if you see that that person has a future, like you're going to marry them, then yeah, I think it makes sense. But the rule is that you got to do everything you possibly can to narrow and eliminate that distance as much as possible. So that means making an effort to actually go visit each other, see each other regularly if you can, if you're able to, if you're allowed to. Um, The relationship has to be a priority, no slacking with this, and the goal is always to you only do long distance if you have to, and then you do everything you can to close the distance. So, all right, next question. Actually, last question. So if you have any other questions, drop it in the chat, and I'll answer that after. Have you and by the way, before I do this last question, please like, subscribe, and comment the video if you're watching. Smash that like button. It very much helps with the algorithm. Feel free to leave any comments in the chat. Um, yep. Anyway, last question. Have you addressed situation where a woman deeply loves you, but you don't feel it back? Thank you. Or something like, I feel conflicted about staying in a relationship. How do I know whether to stay or go? And where does this conflict stem from? So, if a woman deeply loves you and you don't feel it back, then, and this has been going on for a while, you're probably in the relationship because you feel guilty about leaving her because it feels good to be needed and you don't want to hurt her. It's like a manifestation of nice guy syndrome. It's actually very egotistical, 'cause it's like, "Well, she really loves me. I can't break up with her because then how will she ever recover?" It's like, she's gonna recover. Like, break the fuck up with her. That's the main thing. That's the main thing. Now, it's possible that you do have strong feelings for her, but you're just more avoidant and you are afraid of getting close. And that is possible. It's possible. But in those kind of situations, it's usually more, um, how do I put this? I mean, they're not entirely mutually exclusive, but what I'd say is that if you can't bring yourself to even feel like you want to stay with the person, um, like look at your own actions. If you continually get deeper and deeper with the person in spite of saying, "Oh no, you don't want to," but yet you keep committing more and more to them, then you probably have deeper feelings for them than you are claiming. But if you're together, you're with them, but they keep pushing, but you're like, no, I'm really not feeling this, and I just don't want to do the breakup talk. Then I don't want to hurt them. If your main thought is that you don't want to hurt them, then it's probably just that you're validation farming. So yeah, to sum it up, if you keep committing deeper and deeper to them, then you probably are just more avoidant and you do have feelings, but you're not acknowledging it. But if your whole fixation is you don't want to break their heart, it's more that you're not really into them. And it's actually more of an anxious pattern because you don't want to lose them even though you're not really into them. So you can see how the difference is like between the anxious and avoidant. Sometimes it kind of looks similar on paper, but the motivation behind it's different. Mr. R, do you think people will start having sexual relationships with AI? Yeah, I think that people are already kind of doing it when it comes to porn. Um, do I think that those people have a future? No. No. I don't think it's going to be normalized in like a really healthy sense. All this stuff is like it's really getting washed away right now. Really big pushback against all this shit. And people who believe that this is going to be some sort of altered carbon or black mirror future are going to be disappointed, or maybe they're not going to be disappointed. Maybe they'll be happy about it. Depends on the person, I guess. Depends on how fucked up they are. But yeah, I think people are going to have sexual relationships with AI. I mean, how different is it than what already pops up on porn sites? How different is it really from how different is it really from OnlyFans? I mean, are you gonna I guess theoretically it's a real person, but fundamentally, practically speaking, they might as well be a computer because you don't meet them in person. And so, yeah, it's gonna for sure happen. Maybe that'll actually wake some people up because some people are feel like, well, maybe she'll have some feelings for me. It's genuine, but if it's a computer, but never underestimate how simpy and weak men can get who haven't had any affection in their life. Never underestimate what what level of depravity, what level of self-humiliation they could get into. I mean, I was reading, I'm going to be writing about the new sex worker, the new OnlyFan phenomenon pretty soon. And I was reading this article, and um, you have people, and it's really sad actually, have like a lot of working class guys will be like pay pigs, and they will wait. They're barely making ends meet, and then when their paycheck comes, they send money and buy things for like wealthy girls or whatever, just girls who live thousands of miles away. I mean, I feel a lot of compassion for these guys, but it really is totally pathetic. And it's a reflection of how those guys feel about themselves. So I think as we start to build a society where people have dignity again, we're going to see a lot less of this because the whole digital sexual realm to begin with, whether you're a producer or a woman who produces, which by the way, I understand and actually respect more, and just in the sense that at least you're getting something out of it, at least you're making some money. But from the consumption standpoint of guys who are putting themselves out there in such mass to humiliate themselves, everybody is humiliating themselves. Everybody is degrading themselves. And it's because everybody has been made to believe they are pieces of shit, that they're worthless trash, that deserves nothing. And they might consciously claim the opposite and say, I deserve to have all my bills paid for. I deserve It's a slave class mentality. You say you deserve everything, but then in practice you degrade yourself. Entitlement. It's just like a little child. It's what we have today, unfortunately. Anyway, guys, we will get through it. Mark my words, we'll get through it. We'll have a much better world coming on the other end. But yeah, that's it for today's show. Again, if you're watching, smash that like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. And drop a comment below. I appreciate you all. I'll see you next time.